Welcome to the TCU Innovates podcast.
For over 150 years, Texas Christian University has been at the forefront of innovation, and we're just getting started.
I'm TCU Chancellor Victor Bashini.
And I'm TCU President Daniel Pullen.
We are your hosts of TCU Innovates.
We highlight the latest stories of innovation and thought leadership across our community.
Dream big, be bold.
And lead on, Horned Frogs.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. This is Victor Bashini, and today I have a famous TCU person with me, Jeremiah Donati. He's our Intercollegiate Athletics Director at Texas Christian University. Jeremiah, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
To start, Jeremiah, tell us how you became a frog. I know you started working here in 2011, but what brought you here?
Well, do you want the short version or the long version?
We got time. Give me the long one.
Okay, well, actually, happy to do it. So I started in 2011, but it was kind of a couple years in the making. And so the athletics director at the time, Chris Del Conte, who was a longtime friend of mine, I was also doing some legal work for him. And my previous...
Wait, pause, just so y'all know, Jeremiah is also an attorney.
And so my previous line of employment before coming to TCU was working as an athlete agent. So I represented football players and professional fighters, but college coaches and also some administrators, and Chris was one of those. And so when Chris came from Rice to TCU, I became kind of fascinated with the school. And so he came in 2009, but he was also kind of recruiting me. And he would say, oh, I could use you here. Not that I had any or all the answers, but he said, I really could use someone here who speaks my language, who I know, and da-da-da-da-da. Well, he pecked out me for a couple of years, and I went to the Fiesta Bowl in 2009, and I went to the Rose Bowl in 2010. And he said, and he bugged me a number of times about it. And I said, look, Chris, I'm not coming, okay? I live in Southern California. I'm a member of the California Bar. I've got a great job. I'm working with Lee Steinberg. I'm not coming. Quit bugging me. And he said, come out and visit. And if you don't like it, I'll never bug you about it again. So I come out in January of 2011, okay? So think about this for a moment. The stadium is a disaster.
Right.
We're not in the Big 12 yet. There's a lot of work to do, and it's cold. There's no leaves in the trees. Students weren't here. And I'll tell you, I sat from this campus, and I knew this was the place. It was, you could just feel, like in life, you want to be going to places that have great trajectory up, and you could just feel the magic of this place in Fort Worth. And I thought, I came back, and my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, I said, you just wouldn't believe what I just saw. And I said, if there was a time to take a risk, and at the time the NFLPA, which is the Players Association for football, was going through some labor uncertainty, and I thought, geez, if there was a time to take risk and step outside your comfort zone, to go to TCU. And so it was the best decision I ever made, was to come here and to work for Chris, and then ultimately for you and with you. And so that's how I got to TCU.
Oh my gosh, that was our good fortune, and I mean that.
Thank you.
Start, Jeremiah, telling people, what exactly does a director of an intercollegiate athletics do?
Well, it depends on the day.
Yeah.
And since, it's funny, the job description since 2011, since we mentioned that, and I wasn't the AD back then, but it's changed so much. And so basically, I would tell you, for anyone listening that's not super familiar with our athletics department, we support 22 teams. That makes up about 530 student athletes on a given day. And then we have about 250 employees, and that's full-time employees, student workers, graduate assistants. And so if you add all that up, it's about 800 people that more or less I'm responsible for. I am responsible for, and so
mostly more,
not more or less, more definitely. So, and that's so the basic administration and function of those teams and supporting those student athletes, and so those kids, we need to provide academic support and nutritional support, and those teams need to travel, and they need to practice, and they need to have apparel, and so there's some kind of basic things, but also I'm responsible for the hiring and of all of our coaches and the contract administration of that, and then for game day. And so we've got 6 ticketed sports, but we know but every sport competes, and so what all that looks like. And so we've got I believe there's 16 units that are wrapped up within the athletics department, and so it's a lot of stuff. A lot goes into it, and when I have got the most amazing team, but it's it's a lot. The job has become more complex because, and I know we'll talk about this, but there's, our world is changing in real time. And so how it looks today will look a lot different a year from now. And so the thing I love about my job is that no 2 days are the same. And you wake up every day and there's fresh surprises waiting for you. Some are great, and some are exciting, and some are challenging. But I love what I do. But it's the job has changed significantly, even really since COVID. We've just seen our industry has just changed quite a bit.
Tell me this, and I know how you're going to answer this. I think, let me predict if I'm right here. What's the favorite part of your job?
Oh, geez. The kids.
That's what I knew you would say that.
Just the home kids, the student athletes. There's an energy around campus when you set foot on it that you can't find anywhere else. And I have a number of friends coming into town this weekend who cannot wait to be here because they just talk about that energy that sets foot when you see the students and how much fun they have here. This is the most unbelievable place to go to school. But I love, the highlight of my day is when I park and I walk in with a couple student athletes and I just talk about what their weekend was like, or congratulations, or gee, that was a tough loss, but I watched it, or tell me about your family, or how are you enjoying your time here. Those are, the wins and the big moments are awesome, but it's really the day-to-day that I love. That's what gets me going. I tell people this all the time. I figuratively run to work every day. I love being here, but it's really about the energy and the kids.
When a lot of people think about the athletic program at a D1 school, they immediately think football, basketball, but it's a lot more than that. So how do you make sure, one, that you're giving your attention to all the other sports, and two, that people in general realize we have a pretty well-rounded program?
Mm-hmm. Great question. And that's the challenge, especially with the commercialization of college athletics. The emphasis is going to be on football and specifically men's basketball. But it's fun to see, the rise of women's basketball and women's sports. And we've done a really good job, I think, at TCU of really capitalizing that and helping enhance those. But it's a challenge. There's just naturally some sports that, because they're either not ticketed or they're not on television, that they're going to feel not as important. But we try to make sure that, this comes from me to all my team, that the experience for all of our kids is paramount for us. And so while it's going to obviously look different for a football player compared to maybe a sport that's considered a traditional non-revenue sport, my job is to make sure that experience for all of them is consistent, right? And they're not treated like second-class citizens. And so we have a number of what I'd call kind of safeguards in our department to make sure that we are treating our sports and our teams, our coaches, and our student athletes equitably. Sometimes it's not perfect, but that's kind of comes with, again, just the economics of, say, a football program. But I think we do a good job. But there's never really a finish line there. And we're adding, we just recently added triathlon as a women's sport. And so you're adding more bodies and more teams into our community and our ecosystem, but they're off to a great start. And so it's something you work at every year. It becomes a little more challenging just because you have the cost of doing business for us goes up significantly. And that's from travel to food to compensation. And so you're trying to offer that experience and offer it fairly and equitably, but also doing so in a manner that you're trying to, in an economically sustainable way for the department and the university, is sometimes a challenge.
I actually think you do a really good job at focusing on all the sports just based on the number of events you go to. And I think that's a big signal of that. If I'm a player on soccer or rifle or something and I see you there, that makes a difference. And I think you're really good about that. Okay, before we talk about the big things, let's talk about local. You're building a new human performance center. What is that? Where is it? And what will it do?
So it's actually 3 projects, and I actually just came from a design meeting for that. It's the great news in our business when you hear it's on time and on budget. So it's really 3 projects. And so our current weight room the Bob Lilly Performance Center is being renovated. So that's one project. The second project is we're building out a new area just for football that all the student athletes will use, but it's going to be named the Football Performance Center. The Harrison family in Midland, Texas, provide the lead gift for that. And then the third part, which I'm really excited about, is the Simpson Family Wellness and Restoration Center. And so what's that? That's an area where we can ensure that our kids are getting the proper treatment and recovery technologies and so forth to make sure that they're 100% and feeling better more of the time. So naturally, the wear and tear of a season in practice takes a toll. And so what we've found is really, if you're going back 2 years, I think one big gap for us was our recovery efforts and being consistent with them across all of our sports, the nutrition efforts. And so we've really bolstered that, and this is a representation of that. So then the fourth thing is we're going to rename. We've got the front door of our football entrance will be kind of redesigned as well. So the whole area behind Scholmeyer Arena, which is where our football practice fields sit, will look a lot different next year. It'll be finished in July of 25, and we'll probably have a ribbon cutting in fall of 25.
I like all the things you're doing with those 3 projects, but I think one of the smallest things you're doing but will have the biggest impact is you kind of intimated this, you're making an actual entrance to TCU football. Right now, if you go to any other big time school like that, you see the football. Here, it's hard to find.
You make a great point. That's one of the things we've really struggled with, is that there's 5 different ways you can get to the football offices, but there's not a front door or front porch to it. You'll see a year from that'll look completely different. So it's a $52 million project, and I couldn't be more grateful, thankful, appreciative of our donors, because we needed to do this. And candidly, in the environment we find ourselves in with this NCAA, the house case settlements and the need for NIL dollars, it'd be really difficult to fundraise for that right now. We were able to do this during our CFP run, and we had, the first time in my career, I had people calling to give us money. And naturally, fundraising is a lot of work, but we just had magic in a bottle to get this project done in that short timeline. So $52 million, we raised it in under 2 months, which for us in athletics,
incredible.
It was a record. It was a fun time. It was a busy time, but I'm so grateful that we were able to do that then. And this project, well, the one thing I love is it touches every single one of our student athletes. And so yes, there's a big portion of it's football, but that's going to be at every major college football program. Every single student athlete will benefit from this.
Okay, that's local. Let's talk about the macro stuff. Oh boy, that's so hard. Okay. Recently, I know that the NCAA settled with a class action lawsuit that will affect all of us. Could you explain what that is? And then also, could you tell us how that's involved with NIL, transfer portal? Because I know they're all in there.
Sure. So I'll try to be succinct. So I think the biggest thing, and it's called the house case. Well, house is not a building. It's not my house or your house. It's a person named Grant House. Grant House was a swimmer at Arizona State, and he is the lead plaintiff in a massive set of class action lawsuits that were recently settled by the NCAA, the Power 5 conferences, including the Big 12, and then the membership within those, so TCU, right? So every major university is a defendant, in other words, including TCU in these lawsuits. We have reached a preliminary settlement with the plaintiffs' attorneys. And what does that look like? There's really kind of 3 takeaways. One is there's a big, a handsome sum of backward-looking damages, about $3 billion that will be paid out over 10 years. How does that affect TCU? It'll hit our budget by about $2 million annually for the next 10 years. So that's number one. Number two is roster limits. So right now we have scholarship limits for all of our sports. I'll take baseball for a moment. We can only offer 11.7 scholarships. Don't ask me why we get to 11.7. That's not our rule. For 45 kids. Well, now in the future, the scholarship limits go away, and the rosters, every sport will have a roster limit. So baseball's roster limit, for example, will be 34 starting next year. That's a big one. But maybe the third one, which is easily, I think, the biggest headline, is that starting in July of 25, so less than a year from now, student athletes will be allowed to share up to $21 million annually in revenue. There'll be a revenue sharing component. So that's the big headline from this, is that starting next year, schools will be allowed to pay their players, pay their student athletes. And so we don't know what that looks like yet. There's some Title IX discussion, which sports receive how much, which sports generate the revenue, blah, 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 blah. We don't know that yet, but that is, we know, and we're planning for all those things, but those are forcing us in real time, and I mentioned this earlier, Chancellor, that they're forcing us in real time to basically reconstruct our business model, from how we recruit to how we now compensate our student athletes to which ones, to how you pay them, when you pay them. And so a lot of work. I am just incredibly blessed that I've got a team that's, kind of in the trenches with me right now that's able to do this. And we've got this partnership exists well beyond athletics. This is University's CFO and Bill Nunez and his team. There are a ton of people. Lee Tyner, our fabulous general counsel. This is really a team effort because while it's scary, if you will, or it's maybe not scary is the right word, but there's so much uncertainty. It's exciting also to think that in such a historic moment that we are the ones that are going to kind of mold this together for TCU and for the future of our program. And so we've got a great plan. We've got work to do. It's kind of a 24/7 thing at the moment, but I think we'll like what we see on the other side of it.
Tell me this. Right after this settlement was announced, our Board of Trustees came out with a statement, and they said that they're going to participate fully in intercollegiate athletics at the Division I level in the future. What does that mean? Why is that important to us?
Well, I think first of all, if you're me, it's so great to have that support behind you. And I don't mean that lightly. I think there's a lot of people in my shoes around the country that don't feel that. They don't feel that from their chancellor president. They don't feel that from their board. They feel like, kind of feel supported. I don't feel that at all. I feel like our board, our leadership is squarely behind us. We understand how important athletics is to this university. And so I think to make that statement that we're going to compete at the highest level, we're committed to those investments, and we know there will be more, really send a powerful message to our fan base, to our student athletes that are here, but also the current ones, because we're also speaking to the kids right now that are at home, and they're 13, they're 14, they're 15, and they're dying to come here. But they also want to know that we're committed to winning and competing at the highest level through whatever this storm looks like. And so to do that and do it early, I've received a lot of praise, if you will, from other athletic directors who are like, geez, I wish we would have done that. I wish I had support from my president or chancellor to do that. And I just feel very grateful that we were so aligned. We are so aligned. And so we received a lot of national attention for that for a school our size to come right out and do that, after the Texases and Michigans are doing that as well, says a lot about our commitment.
Aside from the fact that you can get paid, but now all the schools can do that, what's our biggest selling point? Like, what do you sell to an athlete? What's the difference, the quality difference between going to Texas Christian University and any other school they get recruited by? So
I spend a lot of time with recruits and their families, and it's one of my favorite things that I'm fortunate to get a chance to do. And I say a couple things. I say, look, if your son or daughter is going to come to TCU, this is not the place to come if you want to just kind of go along and just be one of thousands of kids and just kind of bob along. Like, you're going to get better if you come here. You're going to become a better brother, sister, a better student, a better friend, a better player. And you're going to leave here and you're going to do the work, and you're going to leave here with a degree, and it's going to put you on a different trajectory for your life. Oh, by the way, in the meantime, you're going to compete at the highest level in an amazing conference and amazing facilities that are well supported, and you get to live in Fort Worth and DFW. And so I tell the kids that are here in town or in Texas, I say, look, if your parents can come see you, and if you live in Florida or California, I can say, you're 20 minutes from DFW. If you're having a tough weekend, your parents can come here. You can go there if you get homesick. And so you have the best of all worlds. And I tell people this all the time, that TCU is about 12,000 students. It's the perfect size because you can walk across campus. You can have a relationship with the chancellor or the athletics director or whomever it is, the president. And if that's important to you, and I think it really is, those relationships are. But you also have like the big time environment being in DFW and the big time athletics feel. So you kind of have the best of all worlds. So that's my sales pitch for those of the recruits that are at home. I just gave it to you. I gave you a preview.
I love it. I would come here if I would just need first the athletic talent in order to do it. But that's another story. Okay. I know you've started your own podcast too, and my goal is that my podcast will crush yours.
It probably is crushing.
I'm sure it won't. But tell me what you're trying to do with that.
Yeah. So I did for years. I've done a weekly radio spot, and it was really kind of a here's everything that happened this week, and it's volleyball and football's winning, this, that, and the other, and it just became so busy. And so Brian Estridge, who's the voice of TCU Athletics, who is just fantastic, he approached me in the summer and he said, what would you think if we just slowed it down a little bit and had a little more casual conversation about kind of the bigger ticket items? You can't, in a 3-minute radio spot, talk about the House case settlement,
Right.
And expect to get anyone to understand what the heck we're talking about. And so he said, what if we just did periodically, we, showed your face, because I think a lot of times, they want to kind of see and hear from me when things are going great, but also if we're coming off a tough loss, or just, they want to hear from me, and it's maybe a little more effective in a formal conversation. And so, informal conversation, I apologize. And so that was kind of the thought there. And then we did the first one and received a ton of great feedback that said, hey, I just appreciate you being so candid about your disappointment in X or your excitement about Y. And I thought, okay, well, let's just keep going. We thought it would be, we're trying to, one of the things about the radio spot was it was a limited number of folks that were listening to it. So I think that and the combination, and I send out a newsletter for those of you, if you want it, I'll send it to you. But I think the biggest thing I could offer people right now in a time of so much change is just being transparent and just about what's going on, how we're feeling about things, and and so that was really kind of the point behind doing that. By the way, your podcast will crush ours, but we're just trying to give people an avenue to get a little more insight into what we're doing.
But you said something that I think is so true, and that's you're genuine, and I think people do appreciate that, because they know when they ask you a question, you're going to give them a real answer, an honest answer. Even if they don't like the answer, you're going to be frank with them, and I think really that's what people really want nowadays.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I think sometimes it's hard, sometimes you don't necessarily want to take that call or stand in front of, a room of media and express, why you're disappointed or why something happened. One thing I would say is that when you have, 800 people, that you're overseeing, a lot can go wrong. Right. Just they're humans, and most of them are between the ages of 18 and 22. And they're learning and they're developing. That's why they're here. That's why they're in college. And so sometimes, I would just say to any fan, sometimes you have to remember, I take the losses or I take, bad news or disappointment as hard as anyone, but they're kids and they're developing and they're growing. And so, I see a lot of really ugly stuff that gets sent their way. They're not professionals. These are not 30-year-old professionals. And so that's hard. That's tough. That's part of life. I think to some degree it's more challenging now than ever before, because you have, in their case, I was talking to a female student athlete about this recently. Now the proliferation of gambling in NIL. So it's one thing if your alma mater lost a tough game, and I'll take women's basketball for a moment because this young lady was a women's basketball player. Well, now if you lost money on the game, and oh, by the way, if you gave NIL dollars that supported that student athlete, now it's even more compounded, and the pressure to win has never been greater. So it's just a dynamic of our world, and we have a lot of support systems to offer our student athletes, but it's how the game has changed. So the trade-off with having a massive TV media rights deal that we have, and gambling and NIL, the trade-off is that the pressure's up.
Right.
And so it's just something you have to accept in these roles. That's what we sign up for.
I think there's a lot of pressure in your job, and here's what I think the biggest pressure is. Everybody it used to be only men, now it's men and women. Everybody over 40 thinks they could do your job better, and if they're not sure about that, they're sure they could do the coach's job better, regardless of what sport it is. How do you deal with that?
That's a great question. You try to listen, and you need to listen, and it's hard because there's only so many people who have actually walked the walk and have actually coached or have played the game. And so you have a lot of people that are they're fans. And what I would say is that I wouldn't trade it, because it tells me people care. And if I didn't get those calls, it would tell me people are, they're content, or they're not tuning in, and that would be a problem. So sometimes you get some crazy stuff, and I kind of just tell myself, listen, you gotta listen, but I also I am listening, because I think sometimes you hear things where you say, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Not necessarily a play call.
Right.
And I won't we trust coaches and pay coaches, and you got to remember, you can have any coach you want in the world, and if the player doesn't execute the play, it's not necessarily the coach's fault. There's a combination. Sometimes if it's not going well, the coaches need to coach better, the players need to play better, right. Everybody needs to do a better job. But sometimes you'll learn something in talking to a donor or someone who you think may not have a perspective. You'll learn something about something else. And so try to keep open ears. Sometimes those are more fun conversations than not, but we have everyone in life has an opinion. And I think what I would say is that if you support this university, if you care about this university, I will listen. I'll do my best to listen and make myself available.
Good. And that's all people can ask. I love that. Okay. My podcast is all about dreaming big, this podcast. So for the last question for you, Jeremiah Donati, what's your biggest dream for Texas Christian University athletics?
Well, it's not all about winning and losing, but to some degree, those are the big moments. And so athletics is not the most important part of a university, but it is, you hear this, it's the front porch of the university, and it is for this reason. And I'm not trying to be coy, but they don't broadcast chemistry labs on ESPN, but they do football games. And so like a big moment for this university is when you go to the CFP and you win the Fiesta Bowl, or you win the Rose Bowl, or you win massive games. So I always say, and that leads to so much other success and resources and attention, and that goes on and on and on. And so if you said that every unit, every person has a responsibility to this university, like our responsibility is to keep the brand strong, our reputation strong, to help with culture on campus. And so you see where I'm going with this. Naturally, if you won a major national championship, you think football or basketball or baseball, the attention that would bring to TCU, and I'm not trying to be selfish, but that's like a role we could play. So if you look out, over the next 5-10 years, if we could do something like that, the attention, the eyeballs, because what that does is people start tuning in, they'll Google it, and they'll go, oh, I want to go on a visit there. Oh, I might apply there. Oh, I want to donate there. And then you see how the formula works. And so winning a major national championship would be that.
I love that. And I have a feeling like I'm going to be here to see it too, which is
I love
great.
It.
Tell me this before we close. Is there anything I haven't asked you about?
Well, let's see. The questions I get asked all the time are when we're going to renovate the baseball stadium.
Yep.
And I would tell you that we're looking into it. It's I wouldn't say it's on the horizon, but it's something that we will definitely be doing in the future. I could ask silly questions, and I was trying to think if there's something silly most recently that I could have you officially ask me. The baseball one's not silly. When we're adding these sports, and I would just say that mission critical for us is to find our way to navigate this house case settlement. We're also going through a strategic planning process, which athletics is a very big part of. I think people will be really excited when they see that. And so there's big moments ahead, big things to come. It's exciting to be here. I tell people there's never been a better time to be at TCU. I mean that. Whether you're talking to a prospective student, a student athlete, or donor, there's never been a better time to be here. So I'm happy to be here.
I love that. I agree, and we're happy to have you. Thank you very much, Jeremiah Donati, and good luck for the rest of the school year, and God bless you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
The TCU Innovates podcast is recorded at the KTCU studio in the Bob Schieffer College of Communication at Texas Christian University. Special thanks to our producer, Jeffrey Craig, and the entire TCU team for supporting our show. Go Frogs!